In neighborhoods like ours, people come in all the time, extracting data.
Yeah.
Let me come and do a
Got an
survey.
idea. I'm gonna
I got
help
an
you.
idea. I got funding. I have a health this. I have a school that. And all of it's good. But if it's not done with this posture of like, I'm just want to be a neighbor. I'm not here just to help you.
Yeah.
I also want to just neighbor. I just want to be with you. I also need to receive from you, not just get something from you.
Welcome to Place Matters, a podcast about the intersection of race, place, and poverty, where we explore the belief that the path towards ending inequity and promoting prosperity is through the work of holistic neighborhood development. Welcome to one of the series we will do on FCS's 3 pillars. This series will focus on the pillar of neighborhood engagement. I am Sean Duncan, the Director of Training and Consulting for FCS and the host for Place Matters. One of the factors that define the health of a neighborhood is its level of social cohesion, the strength of connectedness people share with each other, and their collective ability to support one another and create meaningful change in their community. And we break social cohesion down into 4 vital indicators. And so we're going to explore 2 of those indicators each in the next 2 episodes. So in this episode, we're going to explore the importance of sense of place and neighborhood connectivity. Joining me today to talk about sense of place and neighborhood connectivity is our Director of Neighborhood Engagement, Pamela Stringfield, as well as Katie Delp, the former Executive Director of FCS and currently the Senior Vice President of Network Member Support at Purpose Built Communities. Katie, I want you to take us back to the early days. FCS has been around for 45 years, but in South Atlanta for over 20. You've been here that whole time, which means you moved here when you were 12, right? 12, okay, moved here when you were 12. Okay, gotcha. So how did FCS lead with proximity and neighboring in those first years in partnering with South Atlanta?
Well, those early years, there was a couple of different ways that FCS got connected. First, there was a staff of people who were meeting with residents, creating some plans, really hearing what folks wanted, out of the housing and kind of the economic development and some of the school pieces. And so there was a degree of some formal process that was going on that is important to this work. But at the same time, in parallel, there were folks who are choosing to move in and make South Atlanta home, who some were on staff with FCS, some weren't. They were kind of loosely connected, and some who had kind of done this work before too, so they weren't completely, this wasn't a completely new concept or context for them, but they had, they were urban savvy, they understood working cross-culturally, were people at that time too, all of deep faith, right, had a connection to being a really good neighbor, to also how they lived out their faith. And so a lot of, myself included, moved into the community at the age of 12. It was
had a lot of freedom.
A little bit older
Katie's
than that.
an overachiever. Let's just say she's always been a little mature.
I was a little older than that, but it was a group of young adults as well as some other families who moved in, and we just simply decided to show up and be really good neighbors. Some people were school teachers. Some folks were working actually in our local schools. Others just had other day jobs, and some were working for FCS. I think that's always important to understand that not everybody was staff of FCS. Yeah. But we all kind of had a common connection and mission. And simply, we just got to know our neighbors. And some of the intentional time was definitely spent with seniors to really soak in the history and understanding of the place that they have called home for so much of their life. And then, of course, we got to know kids pretty easily. We were young, so we hung out with a lot of kids. We did some programming, especially some kind of high impact, easy, youth programming. We would organize people into sports teams, and we had an after school program. And just also just showed up and made our lives and our homes open to folks. And so just spent a lot of time, I always say, on front porches and and making a really intentional decision to choose local before we chose other things.
And that, I think that set a course for the 20 plus years of FCS here, that that relational fabric is always a part of every equation and decision that's happening. In your new role with Purpose Built, you're able to see communities around the U.S. that are also in this place-based work. What would you say that you've seen as a unique nature of how proximity or neighboring works itself out in South Atlanta, maybe versus some of the other communities you've visited?
Yeah, I mean, I think FCS has always had a distinct desire, just deep in their DNA, to really care deeply about people and the people in a particular place, and really putting people over any sort of strategy, and really also realizing that you're not going to execute anything very well if you don't have people doing it with you,
Right.
and that sometimes slows down your work. I actually think always enhances the work that you're doing in a place, and personally, it's a whole lot more fun. This is like fixing these problems and solving things that are like
very heavy. Yeah.
You know, we've just set up a system 400 years that we're trying to undo. And if you don't have deep connection with the people in the place that you're trying to work, you're going to burn out so fast. But people often say, like, how did you not burn out over 20 years? And it's because I have, I'm doing this alongside not just neighbors, but friends. Like, folks are my deep, like, I'm in really, really good, strong relationships. Like, so many of my neighbors are my friends and my family, and so that really sustains the work. And I also think you come up with really different solutions when you're in close proximity. So I do think FCS has figured that out better, but you also say that always with a lot of humility, because relationships can be fragile, and they're not transactional, and so you don't want anyone to ever think that that's why you're doing it. But really, it's because the work is so much better when people are at the center of it all.
Absolutely.
And so you were executive director and our de facto neighborhood engagement director for a number of years. And about 5-6 years ago, you made the decision to say, I've got to get somebody else in this seat.
4 or 5 years ago. It was that short of a time ago.
Was it just 5? It was 5 years ago?
I've not even been here that long.
Yeah, it feels like forever,
5?
though. Like you're...
Yeah, 5. I'm almost 5. I'm 5 this month. Next month.
She's
anyway.
She's a little older than 5. But she means she's been here for 5 years.
No,
so what
5.
made you say... As I remember you're like, I've got somebody in mind. You like, and it was that... Katie sparkle of confidence, you know what I'm talking about, Pam? She knew exactly, she had sights set. So what was it about Pam that you were like, this is who needs to take this spot and drive this into the next era?
So I knew Pamela through her husband, who I had done some work with, and I'd just always been impressed with the way she carried herself in all kinds of spaces, right? That she was always in very diverse rooms, be it racially or economically, and she just showed up the same for everybody. And I admired that. I could tell she had tremendous leadership ability. And she was taking some time off. She had her boys. And I thought, ooh, I wonder if I could talk her into coming over here.
Those hands. Katie's, if you're only listening, you can't see Katie's scheming hands, but we're familiar, Pam and I. We know what those hands mean.
Know them well.
And I think, too, Pamela lived really close, just in the next neighborhood over to from South Atlanta, and also had chosen that community very intentionally, and her husband, Ryan, and their boys were living a very intentional lifestyle there. So I knew that she had all the things you couldn't train for, right? We can teach the skills that are needed for this work, the theory and the why you do certain things, but I knew she had the emotional maturity and was able to just really navigate lots of different complex relationships and get energy from that instead of like flailing about. But also that she was just a person that people were really drawn to. And so I knew that was always really, really important in this work. So.
Yeah, and Pam, I can't believe it's only been 5 years, as I can't imagine FCS without you being central to what we're doing. So I'm curious, why'd you say yes? And as you said yes and you enter into FCS, like I know there's a lot of connected relationships beforehand, but like really entering in, you're now part of the team, one of the directors. Like what did you see and observe that said, this is why I'm saying yes, and this is what's unique about this team, this organization?
Well, first of all, I grew up hearing a lot about the Lupton Center. I knew Bob from books and stuff. I went to different conferences, CCDA and others, and I'd spent a lot of time in those spaces. So a lot of the work that Bob was about was just like central to me, just my experience. So I'm a literal product of people doing this work. And I feel like they did it well. It wasn't perfect. They're not perfect, but they did it intentionally. They were invested in my family, in our community. There was a lot of dignity that they brought to the table that they taught me of how to see my own family, because I only saw brokenness, and they're like, yeah, and there's more. And so I saw something modeled to me in such a way that it just felt like it became a part of my DNA, where I, as a young kid, remember telling my mom, like, someday I'm going to come back to the hood, as I would say, and I want to be a part of change here. Like, I want to be a part of this being better. And I would say that throughout my life, and different people would either be with me or mock me. But as I keep following my life, that's just been a part of it. I've tried to do corporate America. I was really trying to do that. At one point, I asked my pastor, like, should I go to the Army? Like, I was trying to do anything else other than community development work. And it just is like a gravitational pull. It just keeps pulling me in. And so I don't feel like I have to really find this work. It's just so central to who I am. It's just a part. And so, like Katie said earlier, like my husband and I, we moved to the city and we moved where we live, not because it was a nice piece of real estate we could afford, but because of the neighbors that we met out the gate. And so because of them, we're like, this is a little challenging neighborhood, but we wanted to have lives that were flipped out and not just in a little comfortable, quiet place. And so this was an easy yes for me, because, again, of just how I grew up and where my life was staged at that time with my husband, of saying we want to have lives that are lived in such a way that we want to be able to embrace people. We want to have just flipped out lives and making space for neighbors and living intentionally and in proximity to people. So when Katie came scheming on my porch, my husband told me she was coming. I was like, oh my gosh, what? I've always wanted to be friends with her, but our worlds just never connected. And we sat and talked for I don't even know how long. It felt like a long time, but then not a long time. And I could not believe in that conversation I was hearing myself say things like, I think I want to try that. Because at first I was like, no way am I doing that. Because I was telling my friend, I was like, I just felt like it was for a different personality. That I tend to be more thoughtful. I'm more internal processor. I'm not a serious introvert, but I have introvert-like tendencies. But I definitely am like, what's up, people? I like to turn up. But I thought you needed a different personality. I didn't think I was the person for this role. And but my husband was like, you should take this. And Katie was like, you should take this job. Her fingers told it all. And so I said yes. And it was honestly the best yes, other than saying yes to my husband. It's probably been my strongest yes. So when I just walking in the first day, opening the door, literally felt like I walked into another world. And it was like Pam's world. And I've just really felt the wind of favor at my back, being in this space of just people who get in their ethos, not just on a piece of paper, but just in the DNA, baked in at a very, very real, visceral level of like, we are going to be with people, period, point blank. We're going to live lives and not just produce programs or product. But we want to have lives that are literally connected with people where when they are excited, we get amped. And when they hurt, we hurt. When they get real mad, we join them. And as a neighbor and also as a practitioner. So again, it wasn't just a job for me. It was like breathing. So it's like breathing in the atmosphere I've always been breathing in. So it was a very easy yes.
Yeah. So over the 20 plus years here, our programs have come and gone. Some good ones, some not so great ones.
What were some not so great ones? That's the question I would ask.
That's a different podcast.
That's episode number. Needs change, neighborhoods evolve, like people come and go, like so. There's constant change. So what's the essential of neighborhood engagement? Like what's the thing that doesn't need to change throughout the evolution and eras of different staff, different people in the neighborhood, different issues? Like what's the kind of essential core that should always remain when it comes to neighborhood engagement?
You want to start as the Ebenezer of all this?
I think two things. I think you just have to stay connected on the ground, and you can't over-program the work. Like there's something about just showing up that I can do, and we can do all this work from 9 to 5. the real good stuff happens in the evenings and on the weekends, right? Or in the morning and in your driveway. So I think you've got to understand that this is more than a job, that you're always kind of always on, because people are always on, right? And you just have to keep people central to all of it. I also think there's real wisdom. This is said around FCS a lot, but that you put the needs of the neighborhood over the needs of the organization. And so you can choose to serve one or the other, right? The Bible says you can't serve two masters, right? And I think sometimes you've just always got to choose to serve the neighborhood first, when that can sometimes be in tension with the needs of the organization. And sometimes that is hard, and sometimes there's a tension there. And that doesn't mean that you're not still really executing in a strong organizational model and all of that. But sometimes those can come into tension. And so you always have to choose neighborhood, even for sometimes it's a season. But there, I think there's always a win long term because of that.
I'll say a couple things that's essential is, I don't know how to say this, so sorry for the Christianese language, but if you're not called to this and you get into this, you're crazy. Because as I often say, and we all know doing this work, that people gon' people, life will life, this work will work you out, and it'll take more than what you have. And so you need to know, like, I'm about something. Like, I'm called to not just come and execute a program. And you can come do that. I'm not slapping your hand if that's what you need to do. We need programs. But this is going to require a touch more than that. It's going to require life. We often talk about this being life on life. So not program on life, not program on program, but you are asked to bring your very self to this. So people will see you not just the happy Pam when I'm like, what's going on? But they'll see me when I'm grumpy. I was on a call today with some friends. I was not having a good day because my kids were going ham. And so they got to experience Pam when I'm not the person I want to be. So you want to make sure you're called to this, because it is a hard work. You want to make sure you're called to this because this work is a long work. We are talking about development and not simply relief. We'll always have things that are going to be constant, but we're also about, like, how do we go upstream and figure out what changes can happen at the top or at another level in order to curtail some of the challenges we're seeing on this side. So you need to know that this is going to require you more than maybe a 9 to 5. It's going to maybe hit you at your off hours on the holidays, when it's your kid's birthday, when it's a vacation. We've had some things pop up in the neighborhood. I was on vacation. I'm calling from Florida. What's going on? Girl, so-and-so got you, just stuff. So things happen, and it's going to interrupt your life. But that's the point of this work. My husband and I realized early, because I like things to be real neat, and I have 2 boys, and so I learned very quickly things are rarely
not neat.
neat.
They strike me as very calm, neat.
Not so much. But it's such a paradigm, or it's such a model for where I am in my work. Like, it's not a neat little box I can just put away, tuck away very nicely. It's not all bowed off at the end of my day or end of a fiscal cycle. Like, it's not. And so it's going to require things from you. You're going to see things about yourself that are awesome. Like, I've learned a lot of leadership things here. And you actually come to the end of yourself where you're like, I do need this neighbor to get me over the finish line. Or I need this neighbor to take it. I just need you to do it. Yeah. And so there's a place. So for me, those are the 2 essentials. You need to know you're called, and you need to know that this is a long game work.
And I feel like, go ahead.
I'd add one more thing that I think is essential, and I think that's joy.
Yes.
I think you have to laugh daily.
A lot. That's so good.
Or it's just going to be too hard, right? You cannot take yourself seriously. We're solving serious problems. We're looking at hard things. And so if you don't counteract that with a lot of laughter and with
levity,
people that you really enjoy being with, you just can't make it. I mean, I think that's through like all of a lot of life, right? And just the state of our country and everything. Like, if we can just keep laughing at ourselves, at, the absurdity of things that we sometimes see during the day, it really, really brings a lot more longevity to the work. I don't think you can underestimate just joy and laughter in the work.
And I would also say, sorry to interrupt you,
go.
The importance of having people to do this with. So, I mean, I've loved the fact that I love the people that I get to serve with. And it's been really fun to bring more people in and for them to go, oh my gosh, you guys are so great. So, I mean, Katie's been awesome. And then the new people we have coming on now, like, everybody feels like, you're my peoples, even though like I don't know why I would have anything in common with you,
Yeah.
but this is what makes it easy to stay in the game because you have people who can run with you and you want to run with them.
And I think that's something that I find distinct about FCS's culture or posture around neighborhood engagement that how the language is. So I think there's something to be said for like boundaries. Like yes, we get interrupted. Yes, this is all the time, every day. But there's also like, well, how do you protect your boundaries and your own personal well-being and health and et cetera. But I think part of the self-care mantra in this work, there's this kind of division between like the work drains me and my hobbies / spiritual practices / self-care mechanisms refill me so then I can go back to do the work, which then drains me. And I'm like, I just think like you'll burn out if the neighborhood and the people are what pulls out of your battery, and then you've got to go do something else to refill the battery. Though there's a little bit of truth, like we all have things where we've got to withdraw completely for our own, and yes, there's truth to that. But there's also a sense like that kind of battery metaphor. You shouldn't be in the work if that's how how that functions for you.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing if the work and programs and execution deplete you, but when relationships begin to deplete you, and like then I think there's some work to explore there, because for me, and of course this is Katie the extrovert talking, like the work can be tiring, and I've worked really hard to create something. But I actually, and when I'm at my most tired, I get more life and the most life from those I live around. My closest friends are a lot of my neighbors, right? And so are some of those technically recipients of the program? Yeah, but I don't see that.
And that's, to me, that's the difference.
That's the real difference. And actually, they give life, they give me more life because it justifies the work. And then it's also because they're really authentic relationships.
Right.
And then when it's real, it's just not as exhausting. I mean, that doesn't mean, relationships can be, but it's a different, it shouldn't be depleting.
That's the nature of neighboring when we use that language or proximity. We're trying to talk about these mutually beneficial relationships with neighbors that like, yes, there are massive problems to address. Yes, there are things to fix and solve. But if our neighborhood or our neighbors are only in that category of that which needs my help, then you're carrying a lens of like, I'm always holding the weight of everybody else's well-being and like just not sustainable, right? But like when you're just my neighbor who comes over for the barbecue, or like our kids are throwing ball in the street together, whatever, like when we're just living life with one another, then it becomes sustainable to be interrupted at 3:00 in the morning or whatever. Like this becomes sustainable because there's this broader network of just real people, real relationships, and not a programmatic thing of some kind.
Yeah, I felt a lot of life. Like I've gone through. Well, I'll say this too: if you've been in this work for a minute, it does get real tiresome, and we all know that. Like you need to get your stuff. And I've definitely been in a season, and it comes and it goes, where it's like, this is great, and other times it's like, what am I doing here? And so I'm coming out of a season of like, okay, that was really hard. This is really hard, and I can get behind my computer and just kind of get into the task, and I'm getting stuff done. But I know I've discovered that my lifeblood of this job is being with people. So when I've been kind of in the trenches with all the things, and that's important to this work, I have to lift my head a little bit and breathe and go, you know what, Pam? At the end of the day, I'm not God. I'm not sovereign over none of these details I'm dealing with. I need to just get up, go get a cup of coffee, go take a walk, and let somebody else bless me. Just by a conversation, just by laughter, just by seeing something goofy that I just needed to see that I didn't need to see. And then one time I was having a rough day, and I went out with my team, and we're handing out welcome baskets or welcome bags at Haven. And it was a rough day. And I'm handing out some bags, and I get into a conversation with a neighbor, and in like a 30-minute time together, my whole countenance changed. Like my team looked at me and they're like, you're different, like you're back. And it was just such an aha of like, I need to stay tethered to real people because I need to see them. They need to see me. I need to bring my humanity to the table. That's important. I need to witness theirs and take from them when I'm starting to get depleted of, man, we're in this together. I'm not just here to give you anything. I need to also be a recipient, just being a human to human. And so for you just to kind of, we talk about in our organization, know yourself to lead yourself, the importance of going, okay, I need to get up from this table because I know why I got into this work. I need to keep remembering why I stay in this work and what is the lifeblood for me in this. So knowing like what is going to deplete from you, what is that debiting, what keeps debiting from you, and what's actually going to invest in you. So if you can figure out what those things are, and you can learn how to push into that. So I know I need some people time, so I'll go sit in the coffee shop or go for a walk or go do something else because I'm not super extroverted like my girl, but I do need that people connection because they tell me the story and remind me why I'm
this
doing
is why
this
you're
work.
here. Yeah. So neighborhood engagement is one of our divisions. Mixed income housing and economic development are two others. And those two, it might seem a little easier to measure that we're being effective. How many houses have we built? How many have we sold? How many renovated? How many of our units have been rented? How many groceries have we sold, et cetera? So, but with neighborhood engagement, how do we know we're being effective there? Is it just, well, how many families came to Treat Street? And like, what is our mechanism to where, and it may be an official spreadsheet you've got somewhere, or maybe just something that intuitively you just know. But how would you guys speak to like, how do we know we're being effective in neighborhood engagement?
I would say a couple ways. Well, sometimes we don't always know the impact of our lives in this work. Well, I'll just process this. I don't know where this is going to go. Like I'll think about sorry to make this about me.
Pam, this is all about you. That's why we're here.
But, like you look at your own life and you don't often think about the impact of your own life. You just look at yourself and go, does it really matter that I'm here? Does it really matter that I'm at FCS or doing this work? Somebody else can come in and do this job or whatever. And this work reminds me of like I'm important in the right way, not like I'm important, but there's a place for me to be here in this work. And so I just think that sometimes you don't often think about like the impact of your life, but it's important that you show up to this work and that you participate in this work and that you lead and you bring who you are to this. We do have a tool that the other side of that is we do have a tool called the F&I. So it is a measurement tool that we use. One of my favorite little measurement, there's like several different components that measure the health of a neighborhood. One of my favorite ones is called sense of place. We may talk about this a little bit later. And so my team, we get to implement this survey every other year. And so every year we've done it, I've always been surprised that is our highest ranking piece. And that's shocking to me because we're not Buckhead. We don't have all the bells and whistles. We don't have the movie theaters. We don't have all of the fooderies, situations, and we don't have all that. But when people talk about this neighborhood and they talk about like what's important to them, what makes a house a home, or what makes you feel good, or are you excited about your neighborhood, or what are you proud of, or what's the history here? People often rank sense of place, or they have ranked it multiple years in a row, that this is like they love their neighborhood. We love living here. Neighbors love being loved. They feel loved. They feel seen. They feel connected to. They're very proud of this neighborhood. There's a lot of proud folks here. South Atlanta, I've lived in a lot of neighborhoods, and it truly is my most favorite neighborhood. To just know people who are like, I got you. You need some eggs, some sugar, whatever. People love living here, and we don't have all the amenities. So it's hard to know like what makes this all worth it, or how do you measure success? But that's a couple of ways that I see how we do of like it's important for me to show up to this work, and people will tell you like when you do that or when you show up, that has mattered to me, or man, Pam, thank you for making that connection to Haven or to whatever. That's changed the game for my family because of that.
That's good.
I think it shows up, like Pamela said, in all these kind of small ways. And there are ways that we're figuring out kind of how to measure it. One thing I've always said is, I was talking with one of our former city council member. I don't know how you say that correctly.
Council Leatier.
Council member, who works, her district has probably 15 different neighborhoods. And she would always say, but people in South Atlanta seem to like each other more. That there is a sense of peace and people get along. And we're probably one of her like technically highest crime, lowest income kind of neighborhoods, she said, but there's a different presence around here. And she's like, I can't always articulate it, but I always tell people like, well, South Atlanta's just so much easier to get work done and there's more cohesiveness. And I think that's a testament to some of the work of FCS, but people who've planted deep roots here for decades and decades, right? Not long before FCS came on the scene. And so I think and I have a lot of comments like that from over the years that I've been able to kind of collect that have been, that really keep you going, right? And that people really do genuinely like, we love our neighborhood, and people are really proud of it and will show up, especially and really can come united. I mean, there's been a few neighborhood squabbles over the years, but actually relatively very few in comparison. I think there's been a strong collective vision about where the neighborhood is headed, and I think because of that, everyone has been included in that vision, and people have been able to just form really deep relationships. I mean, people often talk about like, I moved in here and people were like all welcoming me, and I was kind of like,
what do you want?
What do you want? Now they're like head of the welcoming committee. Like, so it's really good. Actually Monday night, this week was 4th of July, an old friend who used to live here was in town, so some neighbors who'd been around, we called the South Atlanta OGs, all came over and we were grilling, and two of the men I met as like children, and they're there and they're married and they have kids now, and they are choosing to raise their families here in South Atlanta. And just to have that longevity, I think there's no greater testament right there, where
interesting.
These are men who have choices, who have done really well, and they could live anywhere, and they've continued to decide, I still want to raise my family in South Atlanta and have the experience that I've had.
Like the success story should have been you got out of that neighborhood and went somewhere else, but the success is like, no, I'm staying a part of this. Yeah. I mean, when you think about neighborhood engagement and effectiveness, like there's program participation, there's like civic engagement, people showing up at meetings and participating. There's just sense of cohesion, and people are kind and they support. Like, what are some of the other things you guys are looking at to say like, okay, we know that what is happening here is keeping this place connected and healthy?
I think another piece of this that's important is that people have agency, and that they know how to get what they need from if the neighborhood has it, like they know how to get that. Like they know the teachers at the school or the principal. They have connections with this. Or if they don't know, they know who to ask. And so I do think there's something about people being really well connected and being able to navigate just all the different things you have to navigate as being an adult, but then also kind of this agency that they also know that they have a few choices and that they have people and that they have a network that will help them figure out, right? I mean, we all need that that network, regardless of our like economic background or anything. Everything's done through network, and so I think there's something in neighbors having that network, but more importantly, knowing how to use it. That is something that would be really interesting to measure and to because I think it's very much here.
It's been interesting to see. So we do the Flourish Neighbor Index with the F&I and other neighborhoods, and like some of the timelines we established to implement an F&I, the neighborhoods were based on, because that was a tool we devised and created and tested here first before we shared it with anybody else. And so like our timelines were largely based on what it took to get it done in South Atlanta, but we realized like, oh, there's some variables that exist here that don't exist in some other neighborhoods, where it's like, so we had to add a whole phase at the beginning that we didn't even plan on, which is like, we just get people together, get them in agreement that they want to work on this together, and like just getting people coordinated where we could kind of say, hey, let's grab a few neighbors, let's get moving. And we kind of think, all right, that's step one, grab some neighbors and get moving. But to me, that's one of those sounds like this is being effective because there's a level of trust that we can move. Like this work is slow. There's no way to make it fast, but it's faster, maybe just say less slow, because we know like there's a network of trust that we can pull on to move when it's time to move. So Pam mentioned sense of place. So there's a couple of indicators on that F&I that we measure lots of things in that tool, but some of the indicators are specifically around this idea of the cohesion of the neighborhood. One of them is sense of place. What does that mean, and why is it important?
So sometimes my best way of like explaining sense of place is I will usually ask a question if I'm talking with a group of people, like, tell me something that you like about your home. Like, tell me something about what you like about where you grew up. like a highlight, just any sort of thing. And so, normally people will say like, oh, we went swimming a lot, or I'm from Tennessee, so we would go hiking or biking, or we were usually outside. And even though I'm brown, I had my chacos on, and we were out doing woodsy stuff too. And so there's some things I loved about like the city life and the woodsy kind of natural nature side of things. And so, so when we were talking about like sense of place, just describing like, just tell me about your home. And so we would just ask like, so when we talk about sense of place, it's like describing where you live. Tell me what's great about where you live, what matters to you. Tell me about the history of your community, what's important to your neighborhood. How would you describe it? What are the boundary lines, of your community? And so that's how I usually would talk about it. But it's just really trying to get after, like, what is that? How do you feel about a place? That's hard to grab when you're looking at census data. Like you don't get like, what are your feelings? And you don't get to hear from the neighbor's mouth. Like, what do you feel about your place? Because it's one thing to say like, oh, we have a library or a grocery store, but how do you feel about that? Is that working for you? Is that like meeting needs? We have 18 coffee shops, or we don't have any. Like, how does that help or impact your neighborhood? And so the sense of place is getting after like, what do you feel? And all of us want to feel like our place is home and not just a place where we got a nice piece of real estate. And so even in a place like South Atlanta, we hear neighbors say like, again, we're not Buckhead, but man, this is my house. And I'm so proud of my house. And it's not just a house, it's my home. And so we love that people feel so warmly and so connected to not just a house, but to a place that they can call home.
I think we all have an innate sense of belonging, like of this desire to belong. And while I think sometimes we talk about that being like friends or family, I don't think we can underestimate about the place that feeling that you belong in the place where you live. And that where you live and your neighborhood gives you identity. It is a part of who you are. I mean, people ask all the time, where are you from? Where are you from? And if you don't know where you're from, or you don't understand, or you're not connected to it, you'll say something, but there's something, it can be something really missing. And so when people feel like they are really from somewhere and they have that sense of place, it gives them just more confidence, more security, which leads to 1,000 other outcomes, I think, especially for children, but also for adults. I think there was some study, I'm going to get all the details wrong, about, success of children and all these different indicators. And one of the strongest predictors of success for children is if they could tell their family story, that they knew where they were from. And I think that's really important for those of us in community development work too, because even if your family structure is not strong, your community can be strong and give you a lot of that same identity and sense of place that also can have outcomes and impact on the rest of your life and your success. So I do really think we cannot underestimate how important it is to be from somewhere. It's why cities, have sports teams. Like, I don't even think it's about the game. It's more about just the outlet.
It's my city versus your city.
If we cared about like the people on the field, we would be upset when they moved to a different city. We're just cheering for a uniform, right? And it's that place that connects us all. And so I think neighborhood is that too. It's like, where are you from? And so people, if they can articulate it, there's a difference in their identity and who they are and how they live and carry themselves in the world.
We've done enough F&I so far where we've got some preliminary findings kind of at the aggregate, like all the various neighborhoods together. And something we're beginning to see is that actually this sense of place indicator, I think I'm using the data terms right. I'm liberal arts educated, so forgive me if I'm using science words wrong, but I think it's a lead indicator, meaning if you paired two neighborhoods who statistically, demographically equal, right? But one has a high sense of place in their ranking, and the other one would rate that low. Actually, all the other indicators are going to come out higher also, right? Because people feel like, I know where I live, I'm proud of where I live, I know who I am, I know the story of this place, and I know the people of this place. So I have a real sense that this place is not just an address for my mail to show up or for my car to park, right? I am a part of the fabric of this neighborhood, not just a vague community, but a real neighborhood. So we're beginning to say that this doesn't just matter from a sense of like, oh, I'm proud of where I live, and that's where it stops. Like, no, there's actual other life outcome impacts to having a sense of identity and belonging to a neighborhood. So one of the other ones we look at is just neighborhood connectivity. How connected are, that one's a little easier by terminology to understand, with the weight and volume of the problems we're trying to solve. Affordable housing as one amongst many massive mountains to climb. Why would we invest time, money, and energy just making sure people are connected? Like, why is that an indicator we care about?
I think it comes back to a couple things. I think it comes back to that successful people have a network, right? And so if we want our neighbors to be successful, they need to have a strong network that is working for them and on their behalf. So that connectivity is really important from that point of view. I also think, especially current as a society, we're all really lonely and we're disconnected. And so if we're committed to creating a neighborhood that's well connected, we're doing something incredibly countercultural. And we know from all the data and everything else that it is the right thing to do and that people will thrive if they are connected. Period. I mean, we can do all the programs and all the stuff. This is, I think, why I also kind of love this neighborhood engagement work, because you talk about sense of place and neighborhood connectivity. You don't have to have a big budget for any of that. Like neighborhood engagement in the FCS budget is actually the smallest, but has so much impact because you don't have to have all the bells and whistles. Like this is just showing up and being a good human. So I think I don't know, I lost my train of thought there, but it's so powerful.
And I would say the flip side of that, not to threaten anybody, but what's also at stake if you opt out.
Threaten us, come on. Yeah, threaten us.
And so, I think about, not to make it about me, but you don't have boots on the ground. You don't have people who, we describe neighborhood engagement a lot of times of that connective tissue. We also talk about it as ears and eyes. You don't get that informal intel of that you have a great program, but is it really connecting people well? Is it really having the impact that you desire for it to have in the community? How is Miss Sally really doing? Yes, you may have fed her with X pounds of food, but y'all don't know that she's struggling, like she's depressed or whatever. And so the neighborhood engagement work, it really helps you get that data. And when you come to pull off some sort of sexy program, you already need that trust. So if you've not invested in that trust, in that relationship, and then you only come to me when you need something, at some point I'm going to tell you, get out of my face. I need to know that I'm a human being and I'm not just here so you can check a box and get something for your funders. And so people will smell that a mile away. And so it's important to have people who are saying, no, for real, we are here. I was recently at a neighborhood that's not too far from us. A lot of folks have moved in, have come to that neighborhood promising lots of things. It's a historical challenge as well. But I got to have a front row seat to that challenge. And one of a concerned, very vibrant neighbor stood up and was like, you guys always come in here and you promise and you promise and you promise. And he was looking at all of us. And I'm in this room with all of these leaders I have nothing to do with. I'm just, my face is there. And so he's just kind of lumping me in with all of these officials. And so he was like, well, y'all are going to make all these promises and do nothing. And so afterwards I said, sir, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but what I can promise you is if we come to play, if we come to join you, it will be as a neighbor. And we will not make you a promise we will not partner with. And we're here to listen. So we're not going anywhere. When all the cameras go away, when all the funding dries up from this project, if we're in it, we're going to be with you. That is our commitment. We're neighbors first. And so he looked me in the eyes and he was like, I believe you.
Wow.
And so I saw really clearly the impact of this work. If you opt out of this work, when people start sniffing around and they feel something funny about you, if you don't have this, they're going to have every reason, every narrative to back them up of you're not really for me. And when they do have a challenge, they don't have a person to go to say, hey, can you help me figure this challenge out? In neighborhoods like ours, people come in all the time, extracting data. Let me come and do a survey. I got an idea. I got funding. I have a health this. I have a school that. And all of it's good. But if it's not done with this posture of I'm just want to be a neighbor. I'm not here just to help you. I also want to just neighbor. I just want to be with you. I also need to receive from you, not just get something from you. So I just think if you cannot opt out. If you do, you may feel well, I'm going to save a couple dollars if I don't hire for this. It's going to cost you way more on the other end if you do not finance this work.
I think one of the things that the two of you have taught me, and I think you've embedded into FCS, is the economy of a neighborhood, the only currency that works is trust, right? Like if you don't have that in your pockets, you can't buy anything. You can't move anything. Nothing will work, right? And I think that's with the actual currency of dollars, because we know community development is very expensive with literal dollars, right? Just the amount of disinvestment and segregation harm that's been done, it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of dollars to make change. But I think we can assume if we had that, we could fix this. And like whether it's nonprofits or cities or private actors, I think sometimes we see those people who have more money than most nonprofits have ever seen, right? And because they have that money, they have that clout, they have that power, they feel like if we can just put up some plans, like look what we're going to build, look what we're going to do, that somehow that's going to like create the change they want. But they're like, but the neighborhood's sitting back being like, you're broke. You have got no trust to exchange here, and how you gonna build that? Right. So how do we? Maybe that'll be our wrap up question for people who are saying like, yes, I've got all these visions for my neighborhood, but I'm not leaning into this trust building. I'm not leaning into creating that cohesion. How do you begin? What are some pieces of advice you would say? Here's how you grow that bank account of trust so you can actually participate in this economy.
One thing I always tell people is like, just act normal.
Please act normal.
How do you make friends in your real life? Do that here
so like
too.
The horse like coming in, like I'm here to save you. Like that's not a way to go in. Okay.
Like just show up. Like be yourself, be normal, and be awkward. Sometimes.
Or if you're not normal, don't be normal.
Right.
Be a little bit awkward and find other awkward people. But just be authentic and be real. Understand your limitations, be transparent in why you're there and what you're trying to do. Bring folks along. I just cannot kind of overestimate or overstate, just be a good friend. And build real relationships and be treated, treat people like you want to be treated. It's just, it's really, really basic. I think we make it way too complicated. And just keeping people at the center all the time is just the way to go. Yeah.
I was going to say asking questions, but we all know, well, maybe you don't know. In this context, that does not work. Because sometimes you come across like a probation officer where you're like, tell me this and tell me that and tell me this. So I would say you want to ask particular questions and then let it breathe. You more importantly want to be a curious participant. Yes. You just want to you want to be curious. You want to be consistent. So, if it's in our neighborhood, we have a watering hole, thank you, Lord, or we can go at a coffee shop and sit and linger, and all the good, juicy stuff comes right there. It's like a magnet for awesome fodder. It's so good. So wherever your watering holes are, be consistent, showing up in those places. Like Katie said, you can opt out because you may have the means to do that. But if you're trying to accomplish this work, you may want to pause that, opt into what's around you, utilizing that as a way of getting what you need, but also just building just relational equity there. Letting people see you seeing other people, getting into a rhythm of that. Consistency is the key because people can smell a program. And so if you show up as neighbor, then show up as neighbor. Just be in those places. And when you get the opportunity to sit with somebody and linger and ask questions, be really thoughtful about what you're asking. Please don't pepper them with all the questions. Give it time. Let that thing breathe. Don't come across like a probation officer where you're trying to get something from them because that feels really scary. People are lifing, and so that can feel some type of way. You may mean good, but it will feel some type of way. So just let the thing breathe, show up the next day, ask a question, back off. Just chill. And you don't have to do it all in a day. Just relax. Go listen to stories. I had a friend, he was in a coffee shop. I think he would come every day for a month. Didn't say a thing, just sat in the corner with his coffee, giggled. He giggled so much.
Didn't look crazy at all, huh?
It was weird. This tall white guy in the corner giggling. And then finally the coffee group that's in there was like, bruh, what's going on? Come over. And he came over. But that was after a month of him giggling in the, just him just taking in stuff, going, these people are awesome. I have to keep coming. Yeah. And so it's that, it's okay to be awkward. Just whatever your brand is, bring it, let it breathe, chill, but just be there. And I will also say this, when you start asking questions in neighborhoods like ours, if you go to neighborhoods similar to ours, people want to come and they want to help.
Yeah.
What people will give you, if you sit down long enough, people will start to get real mad, and they'll take it out on you, and because you're sitting there, and you're asking them questions, and people don't often ask enough questions. How are you feeling? How's your day? What do you got going on? People want to share, but nobody really sits anymore and asks those questions. And so be aware that you might get a whole handful of stuff that's not yours, but because you're choosing to linger and be curious, you might get some stuff because people have pulled out of these neighborhoods and everybody's feeling some type of way, and they just want somebody to hear their pain that they're carrying. So, so it's not a super awesome work. It's not super measurable, but man, is it uber important, and it's going to make all the difference to that person you're sitting across from.
Well, thank you for this conversation, but more importantly, thank you for being heroines in this work that I admire and learn from all the time. So thank you.
You're welcome having us.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Place Matters is produced by Focused Community Strategies, whose mission is to partner with under-resourced neighborhoods to provide innovative and holistic development that produces flourishing communities and God's shalom. Place Matters is hosted by FCS's training and consulting team, known as the Lupton Center. If you would like to inquire about our training and consulting services, please reach out to us via our website or find us on LinkedIn and social media. This information can be found in the show notes. If you would like to watch these episodes, the videos can be found on our YouTube channel. And if you like these episodes, please share them on social media. Your support means a lot to us. This show was edited by Tim Rhodes with music by Eric North. Special thanks to David Park and Becca Malpass at FCS for their work in organizing and recording these sessions. We'd also like to say thank you to our partner, Lilly Endowment, whose Thriving Congregations grant has made this podcast possible.